Welcome everybody to episode 80 of the My Generation podcast. Welcome once again. We're talking about the music creating process. We talk about it quite a lot on the podcast. We get loads of different musicians from very different walks of music and we discuss what they do and why they do it. Today on the show we have Aaron Frith. He is representing swing and jazz. He's based in Harrietsham near Maidstone, and today we're talking about this genre of music, his experiences with it, and also his experience on Britain's Got Talent, which he was on, which you can find on YouTube. So go and check that out. It's Aaron Frith, and that is available on YouTube for you to watch, and you can come back here now to this podcast and find out all about it. Welcome to the show, Aaron.
Welcome, guys. Hello. Hope you're all good.
Thank you very much for coming on today. Today is also, before we get into our discussion with Aaron, the first time we are showcasing some new features on the show. So every week we have an album and a film review feature, but we've also got Emma Cusson, who is joining to do poetry readings, Joe Finnegan doing video game reviews, and Tom Axtell will be bringing a very interesting feature of pirate facts and profiles here on the show. So all of that cool stuff coming up throughout the show, but we're starting with Aaron. Aaron, I wanted to just open with who are you for the listeners, and where did your journey with swing and jazz begin?
So I'm Aaron Frith, and I'm from Maidstone, and I live in a little village called Harrietsham, and basically my journey with swing and music started. I've always sung, but I never really fully progressed to the stage what I am now until I went into secondary school at Valley Park, where these two teachers, Mr. Gledowin and Mr. Earl, really helped me with my confidence and helped me progress in the performing arts sector. And basically then my dad started playing a load of swing music to me as we'd be driving on our way to school, and that's really where my love for swing came, and I've sung it ever since, really.
And that obviously initially started, instead of you just singing, it was more of a mix of singing and acting. You started off in musical theatre.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so that's really where the confidence of being able to perform in front of an audience, because obviously that's a big thing to do. You have to do it when performing and singing. You have to be able to get over the nerves of performing in front of other people, because it can be nerve-wracking. So that doing all this musical theatre at school at Valley was a big booster for me, and luckily enough I got quite a few main parts for the musicals we did. So we did Sweeney Todd, Miss Saigon, and Evita, which I all got the lead roles in it, which I was obviously incredibly thankful for. And they really helped me boost my confidence and allowed me then to focus more on singing as an individual performance, and basically now without that I won't be singing in the restaurant where I perform 5 times a month, because I just wouldn't have the confidence to do it.
Yeah, and obviously at the moment we're not able to really do that as much, because as of the time of recording, it's the 20th of May 2020, still in lockdown. But obviously before the lockdown, you were extensively performing in Chatham. But this is a space that specialises in jazz and swing.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a great little restaurant. It's really up and coming, and it's just got a lovely vibe about it. Everything, all the design, the food, it's totally unique, I'd like to say, and it's even better with the sort of jazz and swing style music which is played 4 times a week. So they do 4 nights of that. And it's always around that genre. So luckily enough, I've been performing there since their opening night. So I've sort of become one of their main residents who perform there, which it's just a lovely place to perform.
Well, yeah, and it's amazing that there are still like lots of venues locally that are supporting this genre. I mean, I'm based in Canterbury, and Canterbury's got we've mentioned before a place called Bramley's, and they sort of support that kind of music as well. And it's great to find little pockets of locations that support this type of music. Because what do you think is the reason that jazz and swing suits a restaurant as opposed to like a pub setting or a concert venue?
Well, I think if you was to have like a rock band come into a restaurant, people want to go into a restaurant and be able to, number one, hear themselves talk, and they want to be able to relax as well. Whereas with rock, you can't do that really when you're performing in a restaurant. It's more for a pub sort of vibe or a bar, because people are having a good time. They're having alcohol, and they're out to have a proper sing along when they've got alcohol down. And where a swing, you can do the exact same whilst enjoying your table's company and that, and it's just perfectly suited really for it.
It's a lot more of like a relaxed atmosphere, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Well, we're going to go into more details about Aaron's sort of specific journey with the side of his personal life with jazz, but obviously, Aaron, you appeared on Britain's Got Talent to perform in front of the judges, which looks like it was an incredible spectacle and experience. Could you talk through what that was like at the beginning, firstly, before you even got on, like getting ready to do this?
I still can't get over it really, but the whole day was really, really well organised. The whole crew of Britain's Got Talent was so comforting, and they made you feel at ease. And I don't think if you didn't have that, then a lot of people would find it a lot harder to do it. Although I was still nervous, I can't imagine what it would have been like if they wasn't like what they was. But there's a lot of filming what goes on behind the scenes, which not always gets seen. But it's a long day because of all the filming. And a lot of the acts, if you've seen, was on my day. And the judges, when you go on as well, they make him out sometimes, especially Simon, they make him to be like such a big, horrible person, and just is not very nice to a lot of people. But I felt when I went on, he was the most comforting. I felt at ease when he was, because the words, what he was saying, made me feel at ease after, especially after getting such a lovely response. He was really, really comforting. Not saying that the others weren't, but I think he's the one you want to impress the most. But no, the whole day, I highly recommend anyone who wants to do it to just go for it, because it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, really.
And obviously, you took the plunge. You made the step. What was the support around you like to make you go, yeah, I'm going to make the decision to go on Britain's Got Talent? I imagine you need an incredible network of people for that to happen.
Yeah. Well, I always thought of doing it. I always would watch it and be thinking, I could do this. I could give it a go. And it wasn't till the fact really what really made me switch on and go, do you know what, I'm going to go for it this year. Because my granddad sadly got terminal cancer, so that was a bigger motivator for it. I mean, luckily he's still with us, so it was even better, because then I'd just be like, I'm on TV now, you can watch me and all of that. And my family's support behind me, I thought I've got nothing to lose, and I might as well just go for it and see how I do. And luckily I got onto the TV. Yeah,
and you not only got onto TV, but I mean, spoiler alert if you haven't already seen it, 4 yeses. What was it like the moment, you're getting all this amazing feedback and the audience are roaring behind you?
Yeah, it was crazy. It really was. It's hard to describe what it's like, really, because you have so much adrenaline in you. When I came off stage after, I was some reason I was really disappointed with myself. Even though I just got 4 yeses, I think all the adrenaline rushed to my head. I'm thinking, oh no, I did that bit wrong. Oh no, what did the judges say? What did I say to Ant and Dec? Because I couldn't remember a thing. But although saying that, the audience were great, and as soon as I finished, they erupted with applause, and it just made me feel at ease, really, and it topped it off with the 4 yeses, and I couldn't believe it after. It was great.
Well, yeah, I tend to feel like with any sort of moment where you have that high adrenaline rush, you tend to forget almost the whole experience. And it was an incredible performance, but, I think it's really easy to sort of look at your own creative work and sort of pick it apart. But I think that's one thing that's sort of so special about doing it live is it's sort of then out there and you had the chance to look back at it. I mean, did you look back at the footage? Have you watched it?
I have watched it, and I was really nervous to watch it. Not the fact of what people would think, but I'm so critical of myself. I was thinking, please don't be something what I do and I don't like it, because it really bugged me. But luckily, I was satisfied with it all. It was. It wasn't my best performance, but it wasn't my worst, and I could certainly I could deal with it because it was such a big occasion and there was so much nerves going around. It's nice to watch back and watch my family and everyone like it, really.
And what has that reaction then been from the people around you?
Oh, it's been. I've had constant messages on Instagram. Congratulating me, and they thought I was really good, which is so nice. I mean, I'm still in the process of messaging it back because I'm number one, I'm not really a social media person, so it's hard for me to get in the mode of replying back to every single message at the same time. But it's been. I've not had a negative piece of feedback yet, which I'm thankful of. And like I said, my family loved it. My girlfriend loved it, and that's a big motivator for me. Everyone's happy.
And obviously, social media is something we're going to talk about a bit later on because Aaron is doing requests on social media for people. But in the show, you mentioned obviously to David that you worked in a garden centre, and obviously during this time where in sort of lockdown, you've just gone back to work. What has sort of been the reactions of maybe your colleagues that have seen this?
No, they really liked it because obviously we haven't seen each other because of lockdown, so they knew it was on, but I hadn't seen them since, and it was great because a lot of them I don't really show. It's not like I don't show it off when I'm in work. I hate showing off the singing and that. I just want to get on with other stuff. So they knew I sung, but they never actually heard me. So it's been great. And I've had a few customers pop up to me and recognise me and want to have a chat, which is great because the more I love chatting to people and just saying hello and everything, especially during this time, and I think that's what everyone needs, just a bit of talking to each other.
Yeah, and I think that's really going to be, one of the biggest positive takeaways, trying to look for the silver lining in the whole situation with lockdown, as it's standing at the moment on the 20th of May when we're recording, is the connection you're getting with people. And so, yeah, that conversation with people that have recognised you, are you sort of just talking about the genre, really?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just talking about. They'll talk about the performance and that, and then they'll just want to know. They tend to want to know a lot about me, and I'll just waffle on because the thing is, the garden centre. It's not like you're doing strict work. That's what we're all about. Not cuts. We like engaging with the customers as if they're our friends. So they just talk about everything with me, really, and then I try to explain to them about plants, which I don't know anything about. But I just waffle on and just hope for them to believe me. Mind you, sometimes I do know what I'm talking about some stuff, but most of them I
don't. It's interesting, isn't it, with that balance of of having, a job that is, a little bit more traditional, like a retail or a garden centre or a coffee shop, and combining that with something creative. For episode 58 of the show, we spoke to Dorothea Ficini. She's a theatre and film actress, and she talked a lot about juggling, working in a coffee shop, but also being a professional actress and the flexibility you need. So how important is having a really, good community job alongside something that you value as your future goals in music?
It's super important because you've got to, especially I used to work as a bartender, and although I love the job, your passion's always going to be there for whatever you want, and it's going to be your main motivation. So if anything's in the way of that, you're not going to enjoy the job. And that's why it eventually ended up for me, really, because I was working late, and obviously in the evenings, that's when most performances and singing would happen. So I had to change job, and luckily I went to Knockcuts, where it was working in a day just before the evening, and it just works perfectly for me. And they're all really supportive, really, because not that they weren't supportive, I always felt, because it was such a tough and always on you always have to be on the ball job. I don't think I would have got the time off like I do now. Whereas Knockcuts, they always, whenever I need a time off to do a gig or anything, they'll do it straight away, because they know and they appreciate that I'm not going to be a gardener when I'm older. I'm not going to be a person who's a plant expert. They know I want to do singing, and so they'll give me that opportunity, because I'm the youngest there. I'm one of the youngest there. So they don't want to throw that opportunity away from me. So it's very important to have a job what suits your needs for whatever you want to do.
Yeah, it's an amazing balance, and I think, when it comes to acting, if acting's more of a day thing, sometimes, those sort of evening jobs can almost suit more. So I think
exactly.
Based on your creative passion, it can really, really vary what, other source of income can come alongside that and the people you're with. So, we're going to keep chatting with Aaron even more about this really great chat. After some of our features, I want to go into what is so special about jazz and swing, so stay tuned for that in just a couple of minutes. But we're next moving in to our regular features that you've heard all the time here on the My Generation podcast. Also, I probably should have mentioned this at the start. If you're watching on YouTube now, you'll know this. If you're watching on another platform, I'm just letting you know too, we are now putting up infographics that have all the timings throughout the show. So if there's a specific part you want to listen to of Aaron's story, or a specific feature you're interested in the show, you can go to timestamps on the YouTube infographic that go through the show as to when and what we talk about in each individual part. But we're next moving into Sammy Bacon. He is our regular music album reviewer. Sammy comes onto the show every single Thursday to introduce a brand new album that you should be listening to. He's been doing this for ages now. He's a seasoned veteran of music here on the My Generation podcast. And here is the album that Sammy recommends this week.
Hi guys, Sammy Bacon here to give you another album recommendation. This week the recommendation is Rain Dogs by Tom Waits. Rain Dogs is the 8th studio album by the singer-songwriter, and it's a further departure from the first half of his career, which was mainly jazz-soaked piano ballads, and into a more experimental and avant-garde stylings with more abstract lyricism, but still keeping up Tom Waits' sort of signature style of writing about characters. It also continues his junkyard percussion stylings, which started with Swordfish Trombones, which was released before this album, and the music feels physical and brutal and clangy, I guess. When Tom Waits was making this album, he actually recorded street sound, and you really feel that sort of city-like physicality and brutality in the music itself. Like I said, Tom Waits begins to tell these sordid stories of Disturbed people on songs like Big Black Mariah, Clap Hands, Walking Spanish. But there is a somewhat softer side to Rain Dogs as well. You get Blind Love, which is this country ballad which turns up nearing the end of the album. It's just a beautiful song. You also have Time, which is just this stripped back, just Tom and an acoustic guitar. And yeah, this album is a classic. If you want to hear something brutal and slightly hard to listen to, but all the more gratifying for getting through it, Rain Dogs is a must listen. Check out. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you for that, Sammy. Once again, we'll tune in with Sammy next week to find out his next album review. Leave a comment wherever you're listening, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify or Apple Podcasts, to let us know if you're enjoying the music that Sammy recommends and if you're enjoying the chat with Aaron. As we've already established, Aaron loves to waffle on about jazz, so if you've got questions, get them into the My Generation podcast, and who knows, we might have Aaron back on the show to answer some of your jazz related questions. And so before we go back to our chat with Aaron, Harry Monday. He does our film reviews every single week on the show. He's from Hastings, based in Canterbury, and it's quickfire film reviews every Thursday this time in the show. And here is the film that Harry recommends this week.
This week's film review is a bit of a weird one. Since La La Land has been mentioned in this podcast, I, of course, have to recommend it. What makes it weird is it's not a film I particularly enjoyed, but it's still one that's really interesting to look into the choreography and the musical art style of it. Damien Chazelle does a brilliant job with musicals anyway. If you look at his previous work like Whiplash and his future ones like First Man, all of them incorporate music in the most incredible ways, but La La Land manages to swing it up a bit and make it more wide range rather than just Whiplash being just jazz drumming. La La Land brings in a bit more jazz, a bit more pop, and a bit more grand musicals from the classic era. So this week's recommendation is La La Land.
Thank you for that, Harry. And we'll tune in with Harry once again next week to find out what his film review is. Once again, you can get in touch with the Facebook page at the My Generation Podcast if you maybe have a film that you would suggest Harry watches and reviews on the show. All recommendations are open for albums and films for him, as well as our new section with Joe Finnegan coming up later on in the show. If you've got a video game that you're enjoying playing, send it into the podcast and we'll get Joe to review it. So moving back to Aaron and continuing our conversation about his music creating process within jazz and swing, I wanted to ask Aaron, for you, what makes the genres of jazz and swing so special?
I think one of the main things is, I know all genres and all songs have lyrics to them, and there's great lyrics to many songs which are in many different genres. But I always think the lyrics in jazz and swing are so beautifully written, and I love that they're all mostly related around love of something. And obviously it could be a love for your loved one, for your family, and it's so lovely written. And when the melody goes with it, I don't think anything can compare with it. And also, I think a big difference with jazz and swing is that the fact that with jazz and swing, if you're performing it live, you're going to see it live, you have to have a massive big band orchestra behind you, whereas you don't get that with most other stuff. You obviously, a band, if you go see a band, they will have their bands, like their guitars and the drummer, but that's only what it might be a band of two, it might be a band of four, whereas big band, it's the one person, or it might be the four singers, and behind them is a massive orchestra, and I think it's nothing can beat it. So that's what I think really makes it stand out.
And so for you, is that a dream of yours to then play in that setting? Because you've done the sort of, playing or singing in a restaurant, and you've now done it on a grand stage. Is it now to sort of have people behind you and share that experience on stage?
Oh, definitely. It's not even about the money for me. It's just I just love performing in front of people. Of course I want to get popular with it all, but obviously the more popular it is, all like the more money you engross from it all. But if I could do it for free, I'd do it for free, because I just love singing for people, and to have to perform in front of, I don't know, 6,000 people at the Royal Albert Hall with a massive 50-piece orchestra behind you. I don't think anything could be better if you're a lover of swing and jazz, because it gets, just listening to the orchestra without any singing just gives me goosebumps. Really, I love listening to all the different layers of instruments of it, because it's just brilliant. It's brilliant. It is.
Yeah, well, it has so many layers to it then, doesn't it? And it's such a positive genre of music, as you said, about the sort of themes that they discuss, and that's, something to really aim for, and I think that that's going to come true. If you look back to some of your previous stuff now, if you exclude the Britain's Got Talent experience, what has been one of your favourite nights of performing that you've already had, and what made that night so special?
That's a very good question, because I've had quite a few good nights. I think the one that probably stands out the most was when I had actually performed at the Royal Albert Hall before, and that was for my when I was at Valley Park. My last year in sixth form, my music teacher, Mr. Earl, we created an a cappella choir, and we auditioned for the BBC Youth Proms, I think it was for, and basically the prize was, if you got through the semi-finals and that, the prize was to perform at the Royal Albert Hall, and luckily enough we did, and I had solos in our song, which was great. And so performing in front of the Royal Albert Hall, which as a theatre itself, or venue itself, it's very the sound bounces everywhere in the room, because of, I don't know if you noticed that on top of on the ceiling of the Royal Albert Hall, you've got these like circle things. They're like these weird things that hang off the top, but that basically just bounces the music and the voices everywhere. So you can't actually hit. It's really weird experience, but performing in front of 6,000, 7,000, I don't know how many people it is. It was I'd never forget it. Never forget it.
Wow, well, I think for someone like me, that's something as an audience member that I never really ever think about. Really, the sort of technicals that go into making reverb such a big thing. I mean, we spoke to Luke Hill a couple of weeks ago on the show about his music creating process, and he spoke about the importance of reverb and how that can, when you're in the shower singing, it makes your voice sound better because it's bouncing all around. And I'm sort of just as I'm doing these interviews, learning so much about actually how different genres create music, and that's something quite special about that venue.
Exactly.
And I imagine that changes the audience experience being in that hall.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, the sound, you could either sing at quite a low volume, and because of the acoustic, it would get round to everyone. It's crazy. Whereas if you was in a little room and just singing low, the person you're performing to might not be able to hear it as much. What else was weird about the Royal Albert Hall? No matter how loud you sing, it was really hard to hear anyone else. So, because it was an a cappella choir, that we needed to hear everyone else and all the different parts, because that's how we obviously joined and harmonised together. But we really had to switch on and use our ears really well to hear each other, and so we know we were singing the right key, and otherwise it would just sound awful if we weren't singing together and harmonising well.
And a cappella, that's an interesting one, because that's all music based on just the use of the voice. There's no instruments, voice, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So we had the bass group, and we had the tenors, the baritones and the altos, and we also had a beatboxer to add the beat, which usually what you would get in an a cappella group to just to add a bit of, to modernise it, I guess, is that what you would say. So yeah, it was really, really good fun. Really good fun.
And for that experience, obviously, it's extremely different from the jazz and swing stuff, because that's more you and sort of timing it with a song that's playing, and it's sort of just one thing that you're linking up with, which is the song. But what was it like then, trying to harmonise with loads of different people in this venue that was actually quite difficult to harmonise in?
The funny thing was, we didn't really have a lot of opportunity to rehearse in the venue. We did like a tech run, and that was our only opportunity. We'd get to rehearse in other rooms, but it was a totally different acoustic for what it would be like. So on the tech run, we struggled a little bit, and we was a bit, oh, no, that's going to be difficult. And so luckily, on the actual performance in front of the crowd and everything, it couldn't have gone any better. But definitely, if you can't, some people just get it. Luckily, I mean, not trying to be cocky, but I mean, I can't read music, but I can hear it. I know when something's off key. A lot of people can do that, but some people struggle at it, some people don't. And so really, the best, luckily that was the whole a cappella choir all could hear and hear and read the harmonies well. And that's the thing. You've also got to be in an a cappella choir. You've all got to have like to say, not similar voices, but you can't have one person who's got a lot of vibrato in their voice and the others don't. You got to be able to switch between, because a lot of people have a natural vibrato sound to their voice, and that just doesn't really work as well if everyone else doesn't, if that makes sense.
That's really interesting, because I don't know too much about a cappella, so it's again stuff I've never really thought about, and it's a genre that doesn't often make its way into the mainstream. But I know I'm going off on a tangent, and I will get back on track in a moment. Right. But there's a film called Swiss Army Man, which I've mentioned on the podcast before. It's actually a Daniel Radcliffe movie, in which well, I'm not even going to try and describe the plot. You can look up Swiss Army Man if you're interested, but basically the filmmakers behind it absolutely hate a cappella music, and they decided, because they don't like it, they're going to score the entire music in the very genre they dislike. And it was really interesting because it was a very catchy score. The whole score for this entire movie was done in a cappella, and later on in the show we're going to talk about jazz and swing specific movies, but here I thought I'd just mention a really interesting example, one where they've taken a genre that's not often seen in the mainstream, and they actually made it, quite a big thing, and it brought to light this genre, and the behind the scenes was so interesting. Do you have any examples of a cappella where it sort of come through to the mainstream and showed itself?
Cool. Well, the first one I can think of is probably the Pitch Perfect movies, because they're a good example. And that's a good example where all their voices match up together really well. And a lot of them, I mean, if what I was going on about with vibrato, you couldn't have an opera singer in a Pitch Perfect band singing his opera. Because his voice would just stand out compared to the others. And what you don't want that. You want this whole a cappella choir to, as if they're sounding like one voice. So, but just different harmonies in it. And that's how you have a good a cappella band. And like I said, Pitch Perfect is a perfect example of this, because they obviously sing so many a cappella songs, and they create it themselves and mix it up themselves. It's almost as if they're a bit like a DJ mixing up to other songs. They can change it immediately to another song, a different genre. You can do any genre with a cappella as well.
That's really interesting. Well, I mean, I'm learning more about a cappella than I was expecting to in this show, so big love to that genre. I might have to check out some more stuff, and maybe even rewatch Swiss Army Man and Pitch Perfect, because I haven't seen Pitch Perfect in a long time. But Before we move back into the discussion about jazz and swing, I next want to talk about Aaron's inspirations. So we're going to go to that in just a moment. But we've got our new features here on the show that I wanted to go through. The first of which is Emma Cusson. We've had Emma on the podcast many times. She's talked about poetry, travel, and more. And we've recently spoken about two movies that are very close to our hearts, Her and Lost in Translation, a very good episode. And now Emma is a regular feature on the show. She brings a poem from her personal collection that she's actually performed in the Canterbury area, including Bramley's, which I mentioned earlier. She performed there before the lockdown. It's a really great little intimate venue for poetry reading, which is great. Great for the local community. And Emma, every single week, is now bringing a personal poem. And here is the poem she'd like to share this week.
Dust. It paves these streets and it evolves into molecules in the air. It collects in the cracks between us that we couldn't reach to clean away, and now it's just too much to bear. I said I needed to leave to start my life over. 6,075 miles just because I couldn't stand your stupid smile anymore. I can slightly remember the smell of your hands as they waltzed across my body, and now the memory just feels like a steering wheel crushing my bones. 6,075 miles. Canterbury to Chennai, I would get high. Chennai to Madurai, I slowly forgot your goodbye. Madurai to Dindigul. Scrap that. What does it matter where I am? But for the record, I was studying in Gandigram. I wasn't thinking about you. Such as my pale skin stuck out amongst the high melanin crowds, I was out of place, yet I felt embrace. I wasn't thinking about you. Colourful houses stuck out amongst the desolate flat plains. We were one of the same and it was stranger than earth, but still, I wasn't thinking about you. The only reasons you spoke was the state that you're mine, and this divine design you had in your mind about us being entwined was lost in the noise. You was perfectly poised and sure of yourself, but I bottled it all up and stored it away on our mantelpiece, 6,075 miles away. We're not breathing the same air, but I knew you cared. I said, we're not breathing the same air, but at least I tried, and even throughout my doubt you wouldn't leave my side, and now you're the only thing I bet on I'd lose before my mind. This poem is called 6,075 Miles, and it's about the distance I travelled from my home to India, realising I'd fallen out of love.
Thank you for that, Emma, and we'll tune in with Emma once again next week to hear her next poem. Please let us know in the comments if you're enjoying the new features here on the show, brand new to the My Generation podcast, coming every single Thursday from now on. And again, you can check the timestamps if there's a part of the show you want to go back and listen to, or a specific area of the topic we've got coming up in the discussion that you're interested in hearing more about with me and Aaron. Next, we've got Joe Finnegan's video game reviews. Every week, Joe recommends a video game that you should be playing from a variety of platforms and genres to give you a new under-the-radar game to try each week from different spectrums, from PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, PC, the lot. Every week it's something different, and here is the film, not the film, that's Harry. Here is the video game that Joe recommends this week.
Today I'm moving on to the second of my 3 console exclusive recommendations with Cuphead on the Xbox One. I'm kind of cheating on this one as I don't actually own an Xbox One, however I have played it on PC, which is the only other gaming system that this game is available on. Cuphead's a very unconventional 2D shooter game. It's probably one of the most unique games I've ever played. It's helped by its Disney-style 1920s or 1930s art style. The game has some platforming elements, but the best moments are in the boss fights with some incredible animations and unique fighting patterns which change as the enemy gets closer to death. Generally, you'll be looking to avoid bullets as you're fighting, but with good timing you can also parry some attacks as they reach you, which takes a lot of skill to pull off. There's a wide variety of weapons available, some better than others against certain bosses, and it's down to you to work out which works best in what situation. Cuphead can also be played in co-op and is really good fun to play with a friend, although don't blame me if friendships are ended because of it, because the game is very, very difficult and you will die a lot, trust me. Cuphead is currently available on the Xbox Store for around £16, although if you're a PC gamer, you can also buy it on Steam for $14.99. Back over to Max.
Thank you for that, Joe, and we'll tune in with Joe next week to find out what his next video game recommendation is. So excited to have these new features here on the show. If you tune into last Thursday's episode of the show, that'll be episode 78. I introduce these new features, give a little bit more depth and detail around what they'll be doing, talking about what the future of the show will look like going forward in this shiny new format that we've got. And so if you want to learn more about the future of the podcast and this format, you can go back to episode 78 last Thursday. And our last new feature before we go back to Aaron is Tom Axtell. We've had Tom on the show many times before. We've had him on talking about theatre mainly. And Tom, he's a big historian. He's a history buff. And we found out when we did the 1-year anniversary of the My Generation podcast that he's a little bit of a fan of pirates. So Tom is now bringing pirate facts and profiles every single week to the show. It's a really fun new feature, something a little bit different to normal, so you can learn a little bit more about pirates of old. And here is the pirate that Tom would like to talk about this week.
Hello, and welcome to Tom's Prolific Pirate Profiles. Today, we are talking about Anne Bonny and Mary Read. Anne Bonny was born near Cork, Ireland, to a married lawyer and his maid. This lawyer was forced to move Anne and her mother to the Americas to escape the scandal. Her father set up in Charleston and quickly expected Anne to marry well. However, at 16, she married a penniless sailor named James Bonny, and her father immediately disinherited her. The newlywed couple now set sail for the known pirate haven of Nassau. Sometime around 1718 to 1719, she met Jack Rackham, a pirate captain. Anne very soon became pregnant with Jack's child and sailed to Cuba to give birth, where she also met Mary Read. After having the child, she returned to Rackham and a life of piracy, leaving her husband behind. Mary Read was born to the widow of a sea captain. Her mother often dressed her up as a boy so as to gain money from Mary's paternal grandmother. Mary continued to dress in male clothing, finding it useful when getting work as a soldier and a sailor. Read fought for the British in Holland when she fell in love with a Flemish soldier. They married and owned an inn. After her husband died, however, she returned to dressing as a man, and she took a ship to sail to the Caribbean. While en route, the ship was attacked by pirates. Read decided to join them. After meeting Bonny in Cuba, and revealing herself as a woman, after Bonny tries to seduce her, she joined the crew of Jack Rackham. Read was a good fighter, carrying a pistol and a machete, according to one report. They both drank, swore, and fought, often urging the other crewmates to greater acts of bloodshed and violence. Over time, Bonny and Read got very close, and were maybe even lovers. By October 1720, Rackham, Bonny, and Read were infamous in the Caribbean. Woodes Rogers authorised privateers to hunt them down and capture them. A sloop belonging to Captain Jonathan Barnett caught up to Rackham's ship while the crew were drinking. After only a small exchange of cannon fire, the crew surrendered. Anne and Mary were seemingly the only ones to fight the crew, and during the fighting, Mary said, "If there's a man among ye, ye'll come up and fight like the man ye are to be." And when there was no response, she reportedly took a shot in the cabin, killing a crew member. Both Bonny and Read were found guilty, but declared that they were pregnant, so could not go to the noose. The execution was postponed, but Mary Read died in prison a few days later. What happened to Anne is uncertain, but she was definitely not executed. Some think she may have gone on to live a long life. And that was the story of Anne Bonny and Mary Read.
Thank you for that, Tom, and we'll tune in once again for his next pirate fact or profile. Really excited to have this wacky new feature in on the show, so please give some support and let us know what you think, because Tom is excited to share even more about pirate history here on the My Generation podcast. So now, moving back to Aaron, I next wanted to move on to some of the biggest inspirations, because, I mean, as Simon said in your Britain's Got Talent audition about how, you know, Michael Bublé has been one of the only people that have sort of made a modern career out of this. Who have been some of the people that have sort of supported you and influenced you to get to this point?
Well, I think if we were to start off with the people I would listen to and I like, they're like an idol to me, it's definitely, I mean, Michael Bublé for sure is one. But if you used to go even more back, the top ones would be Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra, and Johnny Mathis, because they were the ones who my dad played a lot, especially Johnny Mathis and Frank Sinatra. And Nat King Cole I started listening to myself, and I actually think he's got the best voice out of all of them, because and I think you're right, it's the nicest songs. I just think Frank Sinatra and has the he's got the charisma, he's got everything about him. Also, he's got a great voice. And Johnny Mathis, he has such a high range, does, and a low range. His songs are really, really nice. And another lovely thing about it all, they all do the same songs, but they all have their all different their different covers of it all, which is great. But when it comes to inspirations and the people who support me the most, it would have to be my family. For one, my mum and dad, they've always supported me with the music. Without them, I wouldn't be doing it, because I need that. I need that motivation. I love doing it for people. I mean, although I do it for myself, I love doing it for people. Another one is who's with a really big inspiration to me, and is my girlfriend, because with this genre of jazz and swing, like I said, it's all about love. And Nat King Cole, all those big stars, they all sung it about someone, because otherwise it's not meaningful. So I'm always, whenever I sing my songs, I'm always thinking of the person I love, isn't it? And that's mainly. So you got to have that behind you, and especially when they're writing songs as well. You can't just write them off the buff and just think of it in someone else's perspective. You got to have inspirations yourself. So that's exactly what they all did when these singers write their own songs. Especially with love, they always write it about the person they love. So, and she's been great as well, because she does performing arts. She doesn't do singing. She does in drama. She's brilliant actress. So she understands all how the performing art process in the industry goes into, because it's such a hard industry to go into. So we just fling off each other really, and supporting each other. So she's a big inspiration to me. And also I've got to thank all the teachers, the performing arts teachers at my school, and all the other teachers as well, because they all loved my singing. But the two main ones was Mr. Gledall and Mr. Earl, because they without them, again, like my family and my girlfriend, that I need these people to boost my confidence up to the point where I do it, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it weren't them. Mr. Gledall gave me the parts in the musicals that we did at school. Mr. Well, he gave me the confidence and the recognition when it came to singing. So he always helped me. They both always helped me when it comes to my performing arts. So they're my biggest inspirations, really.
Well, that's amazing, and it sounds like such a massive web of support that I think goes for any massive musician, and I think that goes with a lot of what makes jazz and swing so unique. I know you spoke there about charisma, and I know Simon did on your audition about why is charisma such an important part of this genre?
Because I think you don't even need to. I mean, obviously you have to be able to sing. But a lot of them, just a bit like Elvis Presley, he had the charm to the audience. That's why the girls loved him. He had a great voice, and he was sexy. The girls loved it. Michael Bublé, when he performs, the girls and the men, they love him because he's funny, and he's, like I say, he's sexy about the way he performs. And it's a big part of jazz, because, again, referencing back to it, it's all about love and all in that pathway, all that stuff. So you've got perform it in the way and address the audience when you're performing it live. You've got to look at the girls. Although you might be thinking of someone else when you're performing it, you've got to make them think that they're the only ones in the room. The girls or the men, whoever's come to support you. That's why I used to, when I performed, and I first started performing, I used to find it hard looking in people's eyes because of nerves. But I soon changed that. Someone, I think it was one of my teachers, I think probably Mr. Gled or Mr. Earl, someone always said, just you've got to engage, you've got to open your eyes more and engage with the audience. And so I did, and that helps it, because it just makes the person feel like, although there's so many people in the room, it makes them feel like I'm singing to them. And that's what you want, because they've come to listen to me, and that's what makes it different with jazz and swing, because you wouldn't get that in the other genres as much, because it's more of a what's the word? How would I say? It's more of a collaboration with everyone. Whereas,
I think that there are certain genres which, it's about making everyone in the room feel connected, and with jazz, it's almost like making that connection between you and the one other person and focusing that down. So, like you said, so beautifully, it's like they're the only one there, and that almost is a transportive experience. Whereas, rock music, I'm a big rock music fan, and what I love about being in the room, I mean, I've done some film work for Renegade, actually, the band that we've had on the My Generation podcast. I've been to some of their venues and filmed some of their work, and I love being in that atmosphere, because you feel like you're surrounded by everyone, and the lights are low, the music is loud, but and I'm always a big advocate of ear protection as well. I always have ear defenders on when I'm in the venue, and just letting the music wash over me and being surrounded by all these people and feeling connected in this space. But jazz and swing, it's doing something else, isn't it? It's connecting you and that one person in a much more calmer setting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could just perform to one person with jazz. I know you could say that, you could do that with any music, but jazz, it doesn't matter how many people's in the room. You can it's that, like I say, it's that one person. It's a very much of a making that person feel like they're all on their own, just listening to you and listening to the music, really.
And I know this is probably a very counterintuitive question, but I know usually we like to talk about the numbers of people that see performances, and always trying to reach out for as many people. But what is actually the smallest audience you've ever had, beside the number 0? What's the smallest audience you've ever had for a performance, and what was that like?
Well, there's been some times when, at the fire station, because I sometimes perform on a Thursday night, on a Friday. I perform all the nights, really, what they do music on. And besides me, obviously, serenading just my girlfriend if we were just at home, and obviously that would just be her. But if we would discount that, and probably at the fire station I've had about 3 people there, but it's still been a great night. I mean, that's 3 out of a possible 300 people in the fire station. Because sometimes it can be really busy. Well, not sometimes. It's always busy. It's just on the odd occasion it can be a little bit quiet. And this one time it was obviously quiet, but they still enjoyed it. You can actually, it's a lot more of a mellow atmosphere, because obviously there's not a lot of people. It's not as loud, because some people go there to listen to it, but they like having obviously a good time. So the atmosphere increases. So it's a little bit more, I'd like to say, nicer when it's less people in a way.
That's interesting. It's not like most other genres in that sense. Now that is interesting, and I mean, something that almost ties this in together quite nicely is if we move over to the social media stuff that you've been doing. You've been obviously taking requests on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and that's even though those are going out to hundreds of people and hundreds of people have been tuning in on YouTube, you are just performing on your own. So what's that been like?
That's been a good experience to have, because like I said, I'm not really a social media person. I've only just started. I'm new to it all. I mean, I've always flicked on it, but I'm not one to upload lots of stuff. So all this uploading the videos and putting all the captions, I'm totally new to it all. But it's good, and especially that I'm asking for requests from any genre. I'll give it a go. It's great support from the people, because I'm constantly getting requests in. I'm still doing them now, it's a good experience. Yeah.
And is this something that you feel like once lockdown is sort of lifted, because you're starting to grow this audience and actually getting people engaging, this is something you'll continue doing?
Oh, definitely. No, I mean, at first I just said I would do it to keep our spirits up during the lockdown, but I was always going to carry on. I was just, instead of calling it day 13, I'm just going to start. I mean, I've started to do it now, really. I've just started to name the songs as if it's just another video. So yeah, you just got to do it, because it just builds up the audience. The more people see it, the better it becomes.
And so we're going to make sure all of Aaron's links, you can find him, Aaron Frith Singer, on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. All those links will be down in the description. So when you're listening to this, you can go over and drop a request to him, leave him some questions. It'll be, Aaron, could we get you back on the show to maybe answer some questions from the audience?
Yeah. Definitely, I'll be definitely up for that.
So if you've got a question about jazz, swing, the Britain's Got Talent experience, or anything else for Aaron, let us know on any platform. Wherever you're listening, we'll take your questions and try and get them to Aaron. So Aaron, as we sort of begin to draw the episode to a close, I did want to talk about keeping it on the subject of the future and going forward. What do you think the future for the genre of music is for swing and jazz? Where do you think that we're heading?
I think it's definitely on the rise. I'd like to think that it will eventually get as big as it used to be back in the time with Frank Sinatra and all of that. But you never really know, really, because there's back during the Frank Sinatra time, that was the only sort of music, that was the only genre that was going about. Whereas now there's so many different genres of music nowadays. So I don't think it would ever fully get back to the popular like degree of what it used to be. But I think the more people who make it big in jazz and swing, like Michael Bublé has done, then obviously the better it will get. And I've said to my dad, I don't think there's, apart from for example, Robbie Williams, he did a swing album. Or he's done a couple, and a big one in England is Jamie Cullum, of course, and he's very, very popular. I love him. I think he's absolutely great. But I think he's obviously plays the piano as well. So a bit like Nat King Cole. But I think you need more people. You need more people to collab with him. I'd love to play with him one day. I think it'd be a dream come true. That would be. But I think you need someone who could, like the British Michael Bublé, let's say, to build the popularity in England, and then progress to around the world, and then other people will follow. And they need to get the modern day Rat Pack back, let's say, like they used to have, because they don't have that anymore. They've only got Michael Bublé and Jamie Cullum, who are, and Harry Connick Jr. as well. He's a big one who I love. They're the only real people who still do it nowadays. There's not enough people. So if there's more people who do it, then definitely it's definitely going to be on the rise.
And so for you, if you're listening and this is a genre that you are passionate about, show that passion, share swing music in any way you can. The last thing I wanted to talk about then, Aaron, before we begin to close the show, was about how films are being used to sort of continue that reach out. Because a big film that I absolutely love, it's a massive favourite of mine, is La La Land. And that is obviously a film that has quite a lot of themes within jazz. What did you think of La La Land?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I thought the shots in it were great. I loved the colours, what we used in it. And the music's really great. Especially, it don't have to be just the songs where there was singing in. There was a bit where I can't remember the character's name. Ryan Gosling's character. He does a piano sequence where he's in a restaurant, and it just, the lighting goes right down onto him, and it's a beautiful piece of music. And it just sets the whole movie, really. You knew from that, and that, I think, if I remember rightly, that was near the beginning of the movie. And you just knew this is just going to get better and better and better. And it's like, for example, the first song where they're dancing all in their cars, and it takes you back to all the older days with all the old, but like Marilyn Monroe and Gene Kelly and all of that, when they used to do all the musical and like swing and jazz movies. It really brought back all that sort of style, really. It was great.
And I find it interesting because there's so much stuff for different people to take away from that movie. Now, from my perspective, I'm a film production student. If you haven't heard many episodes of the podcast before and know me, I'm fully engrossed in cinema. And when I was watching La La Land, I came to the movie for the beautiful shots that I saw in the trailer, and then I stayed for the jazz and the performance and the music. And that opening sequence was spellbinding because it was all done in one take as well. The camera never cuts, which sort of adds to the fluidity of it, making it almost feel like a live performance, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great when they do it in one take. I mean, funny enough, I've done a few extra. I've been an extra in a few films, and I was in that recent film, 1917.
No way, were you?
Yeah, I was an extra in the front line. I was in the front in the first scene. That one of those scenes, it was done in one take.
Yeah, well, that whole film is based around sort of doing it in one take, isn't it?
Yeah, it's clever how they do it. All the editing and that, it's very clever how they do it. But like you said, we'll talk about to La La Land. I don't know. It's just one shot makes it. Well, obviously, it just makes it look so much better than just a load of different shots and close-ups and long shots and all that. Do you get what I mean? Or you must know what I mean.
Yeah, well, I fully understand, because you get all those different types of shots. You get the long shots, you get the close-ups, but they're moving between them all the time, and the colour palette is so beautiful in that sense. And I mean, 1917, that's a movie that themes itself around, the idea of that one take. It's quite similar to Birdman, if you've seen Birdman.
I haven't. That's one film I haven't seen. I've been meaning to watch it. I've just never got around to seeing it.
Well, Birdman, that's sort of a film that is more about theatre. So it's from the perspective of a theatre writer. I've done theatre writing, so Birdman is a film that kind of resonates for me, because it's about a man whose role in a previous movie is sort of lingering over him whilst he's trying to sort of start his own independent theatre journey. And the way that 1917 does camera work alongside the way that Birdman does camera work, they're very similar. But I mean, I can't get over. You were on set on 1917. What was that like?
That was it. Honestly, it was crazy. I mean, I've done three. I've been extras in free stuff. I've done Christopher Robin, and that was with Ewan McGregor, and that was in a train station down in there. They used an old Dover cruise terminal, which was an old train station. That was great. And then I did. They recently had a 4 Weddings and a Funeral, which was on an Amazon series or something like that, and that was in a theatre. But obviously, when it comes to 1917, I'm in literally a World War I trench, and I'm not joking. This trench, how they did the set, how you saw it in the movie when it goes over the top, was literally how it was. Obviously, there's editing what goes on behind the scene, as you know. And all that sort of stuff, but I'm not joking. This trench they built was about a size of a football pitch, the length of a football pitch, and it was a detail in it, and it really made you think, like, I'm only here for a day, or I was there for we did 6 days of shooting, long days, but really so much fun it was. And you got right next to the actors. I saw myself in the film, actually. If you pause out at a certain moment, you can see me, and I'm eating a soup. And obviously, by the time I was doing this, it was horrible. It's gone all like mouldy and stuff like that, because we've been doing it for like 12 hours straight. And it was very temperamental whether the lighting was correct and that, because they actually used it by the time of day. If the lighting weren't correct, then instead of like putting the extras back in the tent and that, and not using them, and not getting paid, we'd just stay out there and rehearse it, because obviously it was done as if it was to look in one shot.
Well, Aaron, I think that this is a topic that almost needs a podcast of its own. Can we?
I think so. Yeah.
Can we?
Definitely.
I'm just gauging this from how we're talking. It's like how a lot of these podcasts go, where you sort of realise, oh my god, there's another nugget of this that needs its own thing. So stay tuned, guys, because I feel like, Aaron, are you down to do a?
I am 100% down for this, Max.
So, coming very soon on the My Generation podcast, we'll get it to you as soon as we can. We're going to do an episode about what it was like being an extra in feature films. That's going to be fascinating to dive more specifically into those 3 projects, and any any insight, Aaron, that gets between the time of recording this and recording the next one. So that is so interesting. Like because I love 1917. So when you said that, it's good that I don't film these, because my face kind of I went wide-eyed, like, whoa. No, that is truly amazing. So, I mean, Aaron, my last question then, before we close the show, is what do you think you've learned by talking about jazz and swing here on the My Generation podcast?
I think I've definitely learned the fact that there is a much bigger audience out there than I think. Like, otherwise, for example, you wouldn't be doing this. And it's nice. It's nice knowing the feedback, obviously, I got from BGT and doing this, and to basically just showing my love for jazz and swing, really. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing stuff. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Aaron.
Thank you, Max.
That's great. Well, we're going to be having Aaron now back on the show for at least 2 more episodes coming up on the future of the show. One episode will be to answer your questions about jazz and swing, so leave them in the comments. And we're going to do a completely separate episode that we'll record very, very soon, talking about his experience being an extra on a film set. I mean, as a film student who's made small scale productions and been on the sort of camera side of things and directing and behind the scenes, I'm thoroughly interested to know what it's like on the set in front of the camera for something of that scale. That's awesome. So we're going to conclude this week's episode of the My Generation podcast on that note, with a brilliant teaser ahead to a future episode coming up. So stay tuned at the My Generation podcast on Facebook, where you can go. Aaron, I know I said it earlier, but where can people find you on social media?
On Instagram and Facebook, and it both comes under the title Aaron Frith Singer.
Amazing. Well, it is goodbye from Aaron.
See you later, guys.
And it is goodbye from me. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll tune in with you next Thursday for the next episode of the My Generation podcast.